Today feels like a very special kind of day, but I can't really put my finger on it. It's almost like it feels like it needs to be a holiday, but at the same time, it's not. I think it all boils down to the thought of nostalgia. What did it mean to have a good childhood? What did it mean to have fun? What did it mean for stores to have characters? I never had a happy childhood, so I don't know. But what I do know is that so many people harken back to the good old days. And the funny thing is that even today, when I was just roaming around the usual web space, Bodega was actually streaming today on something that she had apparently supported a long time ago. And I only feel like it's only right that I give her a obligatory shout out, since that she's the one rat that I can both tolerate and be happy to see. And by happy, I mean annoyed. And by annoyed, I mean happy. It is a very complicated relationship, but one that I'm okay with. I've mentioned this before many times, but I feel like I need to reiterate every time I talk about this. Every sort of generation, I want to say, has their own version of the good old days. They always have that one particular thought in their head on when things used to be very better and simpler. And I think that can mostly be due to a case of things not really panning out the way we do. AI slop is now everywhere. Politics is now on social media. Netflix is doing whatever the hell Netflix wants. Artists are still getting pretty much the short end of the stick, no matter where they go. My larger point is that I get it. And as much as we want to go back to those days, the sad reality is that we can't. But what we can do is maybe make things that are back to what they were before, if only to rekindle that lost childhood memory that we never had, or if we did had it, we never got a chance to even use it. So, thinking back to my childhood, I actually wondered, was there anything worth mentioning that was actually worth a damn? And so far, there was only one thing that came to mind: McDonald's. Yeah, that's right. I used to go to McDonald's every day, every Friday as a kid, after I got out of school by my grandmother. I would play around in the little play area while waiting for my burger, and that was pretty much the gist of it. And I say that now because, well, today McDonald's is still around, but it feels off in a way. And I wouldn't say that the food is any better than it was before. Quite frankly, it's all terrible. But there was that bit of intrigue that always got into me. It was like getting a birthday present once a week. You get to go and eat very awful food, get a very cheap toy in your meal, and then play around in the playpen and get lost in the play area. It was just one of those things that really brought a smile to your face. The salad days, as some people would call it. And if you were really lucky, you would actually find one of these in the cabinets. Yeah, that's right. Even before Walmart started pouring out all their video games, even places like McDonald's had things like this, where you could play Nintendo 64 games while waiting for your meal to be ready. You would sometimes have to take turns, you get into a fight with one of the kids, and then at some point, two parents awkwardly know each other now because their kids end up punching another kid and throwing another one into a window. All because that they wouldn't let them have a turn in Smash Brothers. I still never forgave James for that one. But I digress. Enough about that. I guess my larger point is that we want our days to be colorful again. And we want to actually have things that made us smile, though, quite frankly, I wouldn't say that everything we had made us smile. You want to know the sad truth? I've only been to Toys R Us maybe twice, and that was it. My mom didn't let me have really nice toys or even let me have really nice video games. It was always whatever was on clearance and whichever looked like it would entertain me the most. And no matter how many times I fought with her, no matter how many times I whined, she stood firm and said, "You can either have this or nothing at all." And knowing me, I always caved in whenever she gave me a toy that I didn't want. But I do recall that there were things about the Toys R Us that I did remember. More specifically, that giraffe. That damn giraffe that was everywhere. And this is the one that I mostly associate it with, not whatever the hell that older one was. That one that looks like it belongs at a Nick Jr.'s cartoon. That was like the one time where I got my very first PlayStation, and where I got my very first game. And ironically, the game that I ended up getting was Tomb Raider 2. And boy, let me tell you, it turned 8-year-old swordsman from a boy to a man really quick. And if you know, you know. If you don't know, play yourself some Tomb Raider. And I look back at some of the stuff at Toys R Us, and even at their ads. There was a certain charm to all of this. This was at a time before the internet was even a thing. The only way you could really know if anything was in is if you watched enough commercials, or if you were lucky enough to get this in your mail and would look through all the stuff in the catalogs. This was when advertising was actually tolerable, compared to today, where you get ads every 15 seconds, and it feels like you're compelled to buy everything and anything. Especially when you look at the prices. A Nintendo 64 for $150 sounds reasonable, sure. But nowadays, if you look at prices on eBay and even on Amazon, a Nintendo 64, fully complete and with a controller, never mind the game, it can actually run you up a little bit more than that, depending on who you buy it from. And those games, those freaking games. Sure, they're actually reasonably priced, some of them, but the really good ones are going to cost you an arm and a leg. Why would anyone buy a port of StarCraft on Nintendo 64 for over $40 when you can get an actual StarCraft running on your PC pretty well? Not to mention the numerous carts of Legend of Zelda and Conker's Bad Fur Day. I guess my larger point is that I don't really get the way prices work. Tamagotchis are still a thing, though. They're actually still something that you can actually buy now. In fact, there was even a fashion magazine ad that I saw not too long ago where they were advertising it, as if it was the in thing now. I think corporate America is starting to catch on that people really want nostalgia again. But whether that works or not, that's for another debate. I think when looking at Toys R Us and McDonald's, it wasn't so much about me being able to go in there. It was more about the mystique of it. What did I miss when I didn't get in there? The only time I ever saw Toys R Us was probably the outside of a parking lot, or whenever we passed by it on a mall on the way over. And then the only time I can recall ever being in a McDonald's playpen was, again, at a mall with my parents, maybe once or twice a month. And it wasn't even for me. It was to get clothes, or shoes, or makeup. And poor little swordsman didn't get anything he wanted. He didn't get to have Reebok pumps like all the cool kids. No, he got whatever was on sale at Nike's. Not to say that I dislike Nike's, but still, I don't know what would have happened if little swordsman ended up wearing those Reebok pumps. Maybe he would have been a great basketball star. Maybe he could have gotten that scholarship that he never thought he would want, but then got it anyways. When really looking back at nostalgia, it can be a two-way thing. On one hand, you memorize a lot of good aspects of it. But on the other hand, you also remember there weren't all good times. I can already tell you from 100% certainty that my childhood was actually pretty boring now that I think about it. I rarely got to go anywhere. I rarely got to have any fun. The only time I ever got to have fun is if I had my mom's approval, and if I didn't have a plan A, B, all the way through Z, and she annoyed the hell out of me until I finally got every plan, even then, she would still be skeptical. And it was because of that I had very little friends, very little self-esteem, and, worst of all, very little toys to play with. But I don't say this as a way of getting any sympathy from anyone. More so, it's just me rambling about that I will just never get a happy childhood ever again, or I'll ever even taste happiness if I'm being honest. It's more about nostalgia isn't always great. I always say respect the classics, and I still stand by that. But I also believe there's a difference between enjoying stuff from the past and being stuck in the past. There are certain parts of the past that I don't want to go back to. There's actually plenty of things I can remember that I could live without. And while I could list them all right now, I feel like we're probably going to get into some more personal territory, and that's not the vibe that I want to get. Speaking of malls, I actually looked a bit over it. I bet most people don't even remember half of these stores. I can still think of people remembering things like KB Toys and Radio Shack, but how many people actually remember the Warner Brothers Studios store, or Up Against the Wall? Hell, before there was Barnes & Noble, there was Walden Books. There was Rave. There was a lot of these stores that really had what you'd probably expect from your typical mall. Stuff you could probably order online or at a catalog. Probably not the most top-of-the-shelf kind of thing, but they were serviceable. You want to know what else I remember? Way back in the day, there used to be things called workout VHS tapes. Instead of paying for a subscription to go to an actual gym and actually get some real training, you could actually take the training at home. How do I know this? Because my mom still has plenty of Pilates and yoga tapes that she hasn't used in years. Or ever. They literally have just been sitting there collecting dust, and I'm actually tempted to steal them just so that I can preserve them. But even back then, working out in a gym in the 90s was very different. This different. There were a lot of aerobics classes where women would get together, dancing around on stair steppers, and usually they would wear things like leotards, leggings, and pretty much jazzercising to some really interesting music. And depending on who you were, that was actually considered great entertainment. It was entertainment for both the girls and the men. And I'm not going to elaborate any more than that. But even then, there was actually one workout tape that I actually remember the most. How many of you actually remember Taibo? Taibo was a very interesting thing. Good old Billy Blanks, a former martial arts actor turned workout guru, ended up making these tapes, and I remember them being prominent all over. I actually remember at one time in my school, when they were still doing the whole health education thing, my teachers would actually play this in lieu of PE. And they thought this would probably be a great idea because it mixed aerobics with kickboxing. But it wasn't always effective. And instead of actually learning an actual fighting style, do you know what I learned the most? Spinning my hands around and lifting my knees up in a certain angle. And that was it. Did it work? Probably not. I'm still pretty heavy compared to most kids. But I still like to think that good old Billy Blanks was sitting comfortably at a very large amount of money with all those tapes sold. Which also brings to another topic. It used to be back then that if your career was on a downslope like good old Billy Blanks, or even people that most people don't remember about like Vanilla Ice, you would usually sell out and do infomercials or even hoard out to go on public television. But nowadays, you just go to Twitch or YouTube. And then there's also Green Twitch, but we don't talk about that one. And I guess when I look at all those things, yeah, they were cheesy. Some of them we could probably do without. And some of them, as much as we would like to have them back, we probably will never get back. Mostly due to the fact that most Gen Zers don't even know what the hell we're talking about most days. I mean, I've seen people look at the old web before, and they still couldn't comprehend what the internet was like. Because, well, they weren't born at that time. They were born at a different era in the world when the internet was just all about social media, TikTok, and trying to trend on all the in things. The internet was a different place back then. And still, a lot of people really tried to get in on that. It's definitely not easy, but I would hope for one day only, we could all find a way to go back to the old web. I actually hearken to go back in the old web. And if you want proof, look at this. This is the start of my current website on NeoCities. Doesn't look like much right now, but it'll be add-on sooner or later. I'm not really much of a techie, and I really don't know a whole lot of what I'm doing. In fact, you can probably say that what I'm doing is probably the bare minimum of what a actual website build should be. But also, that was the whole point of building your own website back then. In the early 2000s, this was actually considered peak. People would actually get together, exchange each other's sites, look at each other's art, leave comments on each other, even open chat rooms just to chat. It was a pretty interesting time. Was it perfect? Definitely not. But it was really something. And hey, if you want to check out what I have in store, or if you're curious on what I'll add to it, here's a link to my NeoCities. It's still not finished, and I got a lot of stuff that I want to add on to it. But in the meantime, I'm pretty content with what it's there right now. It was never meant to really give me any sort of fame or any sort of recognition. This was mostly made just for the love of what I want. And what I want is to show people that I am both an artist and a lover of art. It's really getting to a point where some of us really regret some of the decisions we also made back then. For example, how many of you actually remember when Kickstarter used to be very, very, very bizarre? I bet most of you couldn't even comprehend it. Before, it used to be a literal meme of having a Kickstarter. There was actually a time and place when you would see things that are, how do I put this? They almost seem too good to be true. And I think the most prominent example of that was Mighty Number 9, aka Dollar Store Mega Man. And sadly, not much has really changed since then. Although I will say that the indie dev community has definitely changed quite drastically. Nowadays, it seems like more independent game developers are actually making some really good progress on it. I even see some really good artists put out some pretty interesting ideas about what they want to put out. There was one by, who were they? They were Lucia's artists, Scott and Bryce, where they made their own like little comic series. And I remember that being pretty interesting. And the thing is that it was so successful that I honestly was in a loss for words. My larger point is that don't let the idea of Kickstarter scare you, because it might actually surprise you in the long run. And I think that's also both a good and a bad thing, because, well, I think when you look at it, when you really look at it, Kickstarter is one of those places where it can go either way, right? You can have something good, something bad. It could be probably the best thing you've ever invested in, or the worst. Mostly it's games or even comics. And quite frankly, it's actually surprising to see that it's still around to this day. There are times where I wonder if people will actually stop using Kickstarter as a way to get money. I know Patreon has its problems. Believe me, I know. But at the same time, it's also pretty refreshing to see that a lot of what they do is pretty interesting. I feel like at the end of the day, artists are just trying to get by. So many of us are hoping for that one lucky break, that one chance of being recognized among peers, and finally being able to live our dream of being paid to just do what we enjoy best. It can be a possibility of a career, for sure it can be. However, it's not always a guarantee. It's almost a risk when you think about it. Honestly, trying to be an artist today is a real challenge. It's one of those things where if you don't put in all of your chips in one pile, then you're kind of underselling yourself. At the same time, if you're not really paying attention to what you're actually putting out there, and if you just go immediately sign here, sign there without even having a moment thought of what's going to happen if it all comes tumbling down, you can also screw yourself over. I know that because I used to be one of those people, and I really hope that nobody ever gets into that situation. My larger point is that I get it for artists. We all want to make it in the big top. But to put it in perspective, if all you're trying to look for is some extra cash, you're probably fine. But if you're expecting to get rich quick, you're probably making art for all the wrong reasons. So, the money will come. That's for sure. And I don't think it's wrong to want to have a career in this kind of industry. But I don't think it's realistic to think that you can get it right away. Unless you make that one piece, unless you make that one bit of art that really really goes viral, gets like the most views, the most likes, the most attention, it definitely is not going to be an easy ride. Howdy, partner. Thank you for the 3-stream streak. Welcome on in. Hope you enjoy your stay. Sorry, I was just rambling about, you know, nostalgia and why everything is terrible. Everything is terrible. That's why I live in the desert. Everything is terrible. I find it interesting from your perspective. I mean, yeah, I can see why some people would still really get upset about this kind of stuff. And I really hope that things do get better for not just artists, but for all sorts of people who are hoping for, you know, that one chance to get something special. And I know it's definitely not easy right now. There's a lot of stuff we have to contend with. Our economic situation isn't exactly the best. And quite frankly, it seems like 90% of people are going to be either roommating with other people or living back with their parents because nobody in the world can afford a studio apartment, let alone a house. But you know what? I can honestly say there are the moments where you can look back at how things were before, and it may not solve all our problems, but it will definitely bring a smile on our face every now and then. That's why I built this bar. That's why I like to come on to stream for you guys. I like to add that little moment of respite in your daily lives where everyone can just reminisce about their version of the good old days. Might not always be good, but there were a few things that were definitely worth mentioning. There's a bunch of artists where I wish I had the money to commission them all before bigger shit takes a chunk of my pay. I think a lot of people feel that way as well. I can name 10 artists right off the top of my head that I would love to have art pieces of. And there's definitely a lot of live 2D artists that I would really love to work on a potential model. But whether it's a case of me saving up for another pot of coffee or having to contend with the fear of losing my health benefits, one obviously is a more priority than the other. Which is also another topic that I had to bring up. And that is that, at the end of the day, art is a luxury item. And it depends on what kind of a luxury you want. Also got burned on someone I spent a few $100 on a personal piece. But then they stopped responding after 3 to 4 months, so I'm a little skittish at the moment. Honestly, valid. I think I would be really upset if I spent $300 and didn't get anything out of it. That must have been one expensive piece, too. Like, no kidding. Hey, Reaper, welcome on in. Hope you enjoy your stay. Oh, nothing much right now. We're just rambling about nonsense while we get ourselves ready for some actual gaming. I like to take an hour to just mess around and just sort of yap all on until the cows come home. More of a two-parter, but the point is still the same. Yeah, I can see how. Actually, that makes more sense now that I think about it.